parents threw me out of the house right before my SATs, so my spoiled sister could host her friends for her wedding and told me to sleep on the streets when I begged her for help. So I sent that text to her fiancé and his family, and now everyone's losing it because the groom just canceled the wedding. Can you imagine being told to pack your bags and leave your own home just weeks before the biggest exam of your life? My family did exactly that. They kicked me out, not for something I did, but for my sister's wedding guests. What happened next completely ripped our family apart, and I was at the center of it all. Okay, so I'm 17. For what felt like forever, I'd been grinding, studying my butt off for the SATs. Seriously, it was everything to me. But my family? They're just the worst sometimes. Out of nowhere, they decided I needed to be kicked out of my own house, sent to stay with my aunt in the suburbs. Why? Because my sister, Melissa, was getting married in 2 weeks, and her friends needed my room. Her friends? There were like 7 of them. I kept asking, why can't they just stay in a hotel like literally every other guest? But no, Melissa was apparently too much of a miser to pay for it, even though our parents were already bankrolling most of the wedding. It felt so incredibly unfair. And the worst part, my parents didn't even warn me. They sprung it on me the evening before Melissa's friends were due to fly in. You need to vacate your room by tomorrow night, they said. 24 hours. That's all the notice I got. I tried to reason with them, begging they could stay in the living room or the guest room. But no, that would be impolite. They actually started lecturing me about hospitality, as if these were my guests. I didn't even know they were coming. I even suggested Melissa and her fiancé, Jack, who have their own apartment, could host some of them. Nope. Too much wedding stress, my parents declared. I tried everything, every single argument, but my parents just weren't having it. Melissa had promised her friends they'd stay with us, and that was that. I was just collateral damage. I put up a huge fight, believe me. Not just because it was my home, but because staying with my aunt before the SATs was a nightmare scenario. She's super eccentric, totally off the grid, no Wi-Fi. How was I supposed to study without internet access, without using up all my data? I tried to explain that to my parents. Their response, just take your books, as if that fixed everything. And then there was the commute. Her place was way out in the suburbs, miles from my SAT testing center. I couldn't afford to be late, not for this. I even offered to sleep in the living room myself, to give up my room for them, but they just shook their heads. Unseemly, they said. That was it. No more arguments. I finally told them, flat out. I refused to leave. You can't make me. That's when my dad's voice went cold. He looked me dead in the eye and said, if you don't go, we'll throw all your stuff out on the street. Don't test us. My heart dropped. There was nothing more to say. A couple of hours later, completely deflated, I'd packed my bags. My parents, looking oddly pleased, told me they were happy I made the right choice for the family. Then they dropped the next bombshell. Now you just need to call your aunt and ask her if she'd be okay with you staying there. Wait, what? They hadn't even bothered to ask my aunt themselves. They expected me to do all the legwork. That's when I snapped. I started screaming, yelling about how ridiculous this was. And their response, you're almost an adult now. It's not our responsibility. You need to look out for yourself. I was 17, almost an adult. Even if I were 18, they're still my parents. I was so furious, I started unpacking everything right there. I'm not going anywhere, I declared. The yelling escalated. They insisted I couldn't do this, that they'd already promised Melissa her friends would be well accommodated, and that meant my room. I tried to make them see sense. Melissa's friends aren't more important than my SATs. As my parents, you should be supporting me, not constantly prioritizing her. But they just weren't interested. They just shut down. Finally, in a desperate, last-ditch effort, even though I knew it was probably pointless, I called Melissa. We've never gotten along, like ever. She doesn't like me, I don't like her. But I thought, maybe, just this once, she'd talk to our parents, help me out. I really, truly did not want to be homeless a few days before my SATs. I told her the situation, begged her to do something. She put me on speaker. Then, in a voice I will never forget, she said, I want you to hear this loud and clear. I promised my friends they'd stay here, and I'm not going back on that. I don't care about your SATs, or whatever. I want you out of the house. If you can't find a place to live, go live on the streets for all I care. I stood there, listening to my own sister tell me to go live on the streets. And my parents, they just stood there. Not a word. Nothing. That was probably the most heartless thing Melissa has ever done. And in that moment, seeing my parents' silence, it hit me. I wasn't an important part of this family. I don't even think they considered me family at all. That was it. The absolute last straw. Without another word, I grabbed my bags, walked out, and went straight to my friend's place. It wasn't ideal, believe me. I felt like such a burden, even though her family was incredibly kind, telling me I was welcome for as long as I needed to stay. They actually understood how difficult my situation was. For days past, I took the SAT yesterday, and thankfully it went pretty well, despite all the turmoil. But when I got back, I finally allowed myself to truly feel everything. Up until then, it had all been a blur. I'd pushed the anger and hurt down, channeling every ounce of energy into studying. But now, with the SAT over, it all flooded back. The more I thought about how my family had treated me, the angrier I got. It was just so fundamentally unfair. There was no good reason why I couldn't have stayed. Even if I hadn't given up my room, I could have just stayed in the living room. But for some reason, they just didn't want me around. The humiliation, the betrayal, it was all too much. So, I did something I knew had to be done. I reached out to Jack, Melissa's fiancé. I didn't want to ruin anything for her, not explicitly. I just thought he deserved to know the kind of person he was marrying and the kind of family he was marrying into. I honestly had no idea that one message would unleash such extreme repercussions. It was just a week before the wedding, and that morning, my parents called me. Everyone was losing their minds, apparently. Jack had called off the wedding, and they immediately knew it was my fault. After I sent him that message, he confronted Melissa. He asked her what was really going on, and she told him the truth. That she'd made our parents kick me out, so her friends could have my room. Jack, like any sane person, was furious. He pointed out all the same solutions I had. The living room, a hotel, his and Melissa's apartment. He couldn't believe they'd pushed me out right before my SATs, something everyone knew I'd been preparing for months. But Melissa kept making excuses until she finally admitted the real reason. She just didn't want me in the house, or even at the wedding. She found me annoying. She didn't want to constantly have to see me around. That was it. The only reason she put me through all that trouble. Because I was annoying. And my parents, they were in on it. It's even worse when you think about it. Naturally, when Melissa told Jack that, they had a massive fight. He called her heartless, one of the most selfish people he'd ever met. He demanded she apologize to me, make things right. But Melissa, being Melissa, refused. She didn't like me, she said, and she didn't think I deserved it. That just made the fight explode. He finally told her he couldn't be with someone like that, and he called off the wedding. He just left. He didn't even contact her after that. Melissa, deluded, apparently thought he'd come back. She only started panicking when he still wasn't there the next morning. That's when my parents called me, demanding I fix it. You caused all this drama, they said. You need to talk to Jack. What did they expect me to say? Oh, it was all a lie. I told him the truth. Even if I could lie, I wouldn't. In my opinion, Jack did the right thing. It wasn't my responsibility to fix her relationship. She told me to go live on the streets. Why would I help her now? My family has always treated me badly, but I've never had anywhere to go. My grandparents live out of state, and I hate asking for help. Showing up at my friend's place was already incredibly hard for me. I'd never talked about any of this before. But after seeing Jack's reaction, I finally found my courage. If he, a non-relative, could be a decent person and cut ties, maybe my own family would too. So I told my parents, point blank, not only am I not talking to Jack, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person Melissa is and how terrible you both are. I told them I was going to post about it on social media for the whole world to see why her wedding was called off. Suddenly, their attitude completely flipped. They started begging me, pleading. Their main concern, Melissa and Jack hadn't made a formal announcement, and if I spilled the beans, Melissa would blame them for letting me know. Pathetic. They were desperate to keep it quiet, promising me anything if I just wouldn't post. all because they didn't want Melissa to get mad at them. It was so transparent. I honestly thought it was pathetic, but I also questioned if it was the right thing for me to do. Would I be the bad guy if I posted before Melissa made a statement? Update 1. So, I didn't make any social media posts. After thinking it over, I realized I just didn't want to get more tangled in that mess. Online drama would just drag me deeper, and I was so over it. I blocked my parents and Melissa. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. Instead, I reached out to my paternal grandparents. We don't see them often, but I've always felt a connection with them. I finally decided it was time to talk to somebody in my family if I was ever going to get out of this situation. I told them everything. Not just the recent nightmare, but everything that had happened over the years. I won't get into all the details, but there have been so many incidents that made me feel unimportant. Melissa, she's always hated me, and she made that crystal clear in her live on the streets comment. But honestly, the feeling's mutual. I also knew that when push came to shove, my parents would always choose Melissa. She was the golden child, the darling daughter. But even I hadn't expected the favoritism to reach these levels. I'd always been treated badly, but I'd kept quiet, too uncomfortable to talk about it with anyone. I also really dislike asking for help. But after telling Jack what happened and seeing his reaction, a person not even related to me acting with decency, it clicked. If he could do it, maybe my own family would too. So I opened up, and my grandparents, they reacted exactly how I'd hoped. I spoke to them over the phone, as they live out of state. My grandfather promised they'd fly in by the end of the week, swearing they would make sure I was taken care of. My grandmother was furious. She kept apologizing to me, saying she felt like she'd failed to raise her son, my dad, to be a good man, because a good man would never treat his own daughter like this. And honestly, that conversation cleared up a huge, nagging concern. I'd always, deep down, wondered if I was adopted. Because the way they treated me, like I was always on the sidelines, it felt like there had to be some reason, some explanation. But nope, not adopted. So, I still don't understand why they've always seemingly hated me. Melissa's hatred, though, that's always been pretty clear. I just chalked it up to her being an insecure brat who always needed all eyes on her. She couldn't stand the thought of her younger sister getting any attention, so she'd go out of her way to make me feel small. And my parents, of course, always enabled her. I'm sure Melissa is seething right now, blaming me for Jack leaving her. If I hadn't spoken to him, they'd probably be getting married this week. But everything is a huge mess, and I'm pretty sure she blames me completely. As far as I know, neither she nor Jack have made any official wedding announcements. I've blocked her, but not Jack. I still follow him on social media, just in case he posts something. For now, I'm just waiting for my grandparents to arrive. Then maybe I can finally get out of my friend's hair. She and her parents have been amazing. My friend even seemed a little sad when I told her I'd be leaving once my grandparents showed up. But we'll still see each other at school, and she knows this was bound to happen eventually. I'll miss them both so much, her and her parents. For the first time in my life, I felt truly wanted somewhere. That feeling is bittersweet. Update 2. Okay, update time. My grandparents finally made it. They had some work to wrap up, so it took a few extra days, but they're here. A lot has happened in the last 4 days since my last update. Yesterday, Melissa and Jack put out a joint statement on social media. They've decided to postpone their wedding indefinitely. Indefinitely. Not canceled, but postponed. Which surprised me, because last I heard, he was calling the whole thing off. But I guess it makes sense. They've been together since middle school, on again, off again, but mostly together these last few years. Maybe they're trying to work it out. Honestly, good for them. Jack never replied to my message directly, but my parents were the ones who told me he'd confronted Melissa and threatened to call off the wedding. From what I know of him, he's a good guy. If Melissa can make it work, I genuinely hope she does. My grandparents arrived last night, coming straight from the airport to my friend's house. They wanted to thank her parents and her for taking such good care of me. I was overjoyed to see them, and even happier to know they planned to tell my other grandparents, my maternal ones, what was going on. I'm not super close with them, so I was a bit hesitant, but I decided to go through with it. So now everyone knows. We called them up last night and laid out everything about my family and how they've treated me. After the visit, I was already packed, So I finally left my friend's place with my paternal grandparents and moved into their hotel. I even have my own room. Pretty cool. Anyway, once we were settled, they called my maternal grandparents. And they were just as furious. Unfortunately, my maternal grandma is really sick, so they can't fly out to see me, which I completely understand. But we had a long discussion, and everyone agreed I shouldn't go back home. My parents haven't contacted me once since I blocked them, or even checked if I was okay. The only time they reached out was to yell at me for causing chaos with Jack. It's been made abundantly clear I'm not wanted there. My grandparents came up with a plan. I still have a year left of high school, so I could stay with my friend if her family was still willing to have me. Then, after graduation, I'd move in with my paternal grandparents until I started college. It sounded perfect. This morning, we spoke to my friend's parents again. They were more than happy to have me stay until high school ended. My grandparents insisted on covering all their expenses, but my friend's parents, being the amazing people they are, refused any money. They said they were well off, and it wasn't necessary. But my grandparents are firm about reimbursing them for everything. I'm so incredibly happy to live with my best friend. Even in the past, when I complained about my parents, she'd always say she and her family would happily take me in. I know now she wasn't just saying it. She truly meant it. You know, very few people are lucky enough to find a friend like that. Honestly, she's as good as my real sister. Definitely better than Melissa, that's for sure. So, I'm beyond grateful my grandparents came. They're handling all the legal stuff, too, and are getting in touch with my parents as I type this. I'll keep you guys updated on how that goes. Update 3. Hey everyone. So, a couple more weeks have passed since my last update, and honestly, things have completely turned around. For the better. I'm officially living with my friend now, and I have absolutely no contact with my parents. After my grandparents confronted them, my parents actually signed away their parental rights over me. Yeah, you heard that right. My grandparents now have primary custody, so I'll finish high school here, then move in with them for college. All my grandparents want nothing to do with my parents now, and frankly, it serves them right for treating me so terribly all these years. And college, that huge financial stressor, gone. Before, I was sure I'd have to take out massive student loans or work my way through. But my grandparents have reassured me they'll cover everything. I don't have a single thing to worry about anymore. Honestly, I tried really hard to feel bad that my parents found it so easy to just give me up, but all I felt was this overwhelming sense of relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. I don't have to deal with that family anymore. And I truly can't find a single reason to be sad about it. My grandparents also told me that the rest of our relatives know what happened, how my parents treated me, and how they just gave up their rights. I think, for a good long while, our other relatives will be keeping their distance from them too. I've also had a lot of people message me, checking in. They don't mention the situation directly, but I know why they're suddenly reaching out, and I really, truly appreciate it. Oh, and another thing, Melissa and Jack officially broke up and called off their wedding. Turns out, it wasn't just what I told Jack. Her behavior had apparently become pretty controlling since they got engaged, and he'd been struggling with it. So they were already fighting a lot, and my revelation was just the final push. I'm not really taking their breakup too seriously, though. They've done this so many times before. If they want to, I'm sure they'll end up back together. But that's none of my business. I'm just glad I get to live my life now, the way I want to. No more seeing or meeting my parents, no more Melissa. My best friend and her parents are amazing, and I'm genuinely so much happier than I used to be. Even my other friends have noticed the change. Apparently, I used to be constantly stressed out. So that's my story. It's been a wild ride, and honestly, a painful one. But I'm finally in a good place. I'm curious, what would you have done in my shoes? Have any of you ever had family members treat you so badly to the point of giving up their parental rights? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.